Happy Friday, everyone. How's it going? Will, how has your week been?
Oh, it's been one of those weeks that's just been. It's felt like I've had brain fog all week, so I've been getting by really. Um, but I'm excited to be here now, for sure.
Talk about one of your favorite topics.
Talking about one of my favorite topics, one of the ones that I actually feel proficient in. Every other topic, I feel like a bit of an imposter sometimes when I talk about sales and stuff, because there's so many things that you can disagree with in that. Whereas this one's, I feel like there's a pretty, yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one. Actually, that's what I'll say.
Okay, Will. So we're in the first 2 minutes here. Everybody's joining. What is our question of the day?
Our question of the day is one that's near and dear to my heart. And I want to know, everyone in the chat, what is your favorite Taylor Swift song? All right. And the person who has the same one as me, I'm gonna give them a shout out or send them a t-shirt or something like that if someone has the same favorite Taylor Swift song as me.
I was really worried you're going to say, is Alexander Keith's your favorite beer? And I'm like, sorry, guys, show's over today. See you next week.
That's quality. I suppose you know Keith's.
Keith's? Oh, yeah. Keith's big everywhere.
Well, we got a brewery here in Halifax.
Yeah, that's why I was teasing you, because you
Right,
added one of
okay.
your TikTok videos too. That's why I was like, you're like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with beer? And I'm like, oh,
Ah, now I get it because I didn't. I'm not originally from here, so I assumed Keith's was just like a very niche Canadian beer. I didn't realize it was all over. Uh,
yeah. I think one of the bigger breweries bought it, so it just kind of went everywhere. But that's why I was teasing you.
they've got a really good spot down here in Halifax. Actually, it's called Keith's Landing. Real good vibe. Lots of nice pirate maritime decor. I might actually have to head there now that I'm talking about it.
Your Friday is planned.
Friday afternoon, finish at 2 p.m. Right?
Hey, why not?
Is my boss in watching? I better just check real
Yeah,
quick
yeah.
before.
He hasn't thrown it in yet, so. Okay,
Awesome.
so I feel like there's one big question that we should lead with, and that is, what is social selling?
Yeah. Well, maybe to say what it's not first up. It's not
Yeah,
just
let's do it.
selling on social media. Like I think a lot of people get the two confused. They hear social and they hear selling. They're like, oh, sending LinkedIn messages to try and book meetings. Uh,
Insert pitch slap here.
exactly right. Even good messages that aren't just pitch slaps, that are more just creating a conversation. That's not necessarily to me social selling. To me, social selling is getting involved in your circles, the communities of which your prospects are in on social media, getting part of that conversation, maybe even creating content within it to build more familiarity with prospects, with um, people who could potentially lead to being a customer at some point in the future, while also building yourself a personal brand.
I think the one thing I wish people knew about social selling is that it's building in public, and
Mm,
it's breaking everything we got taught in sales, because sales, we always, right, it's always one-on-one. It's that one-on-one relationship. Social selling is like the first tool that we get in sales, other than maybe a sequencer, that
mhm,
breaks the one-on-one and allows us to talk to basically as many people as we can connect with.
yeah. And I mean, I think it breaks it in more than one way as well. Everything in sales gets measured. We're constantly, how many calls did you make today? How many emails did you send? What was your response rate? What was your connect conversation rate on those cold calls? How many meetings did you book through that? Whereas social selling is one of those things that you can't really measure as strongly, which is why I think a lot of teams don't do it, because it's hard to say, okay, well, this we're doing all this activity until you start booking meetings from it. It's really hard to justify it because you can't really measure its success until you start seeing those benefits.
Did you find that when you were, because your accounts grew fast, like really fast, did you find when you're going through that process that people were trying to either monetize it or like track every little bit of it?
I was lucky when I started really doubled down on social selling. I had a manager who really supported the idea. He kind of already seen the value in these people who have led the way long before I was even on LinkedIn. Big names who've been social selling for years, and have really built brands based off that. So he believed in it from the get go. Actually, he told me a story once. He and it's the person who probably comes up all the time. One of the first people who really went into social selling. He got a message from Sarah Brazier, and the message just said, "Hey, guess who just got assigned the Proposify account?" Which was the company I worked at. That was all she said, and he was like, "Okay, I'll take a meeting." That's all she needed to do because he knew who she was because she'd been mass marketing essentially, never spoken to him, never called him, never emailed him. But because of that familiarity from social selling, he saw that and thought, "Well, we sell a sales solution. Will's building this sales brand. It can only help us, really." And I was lucky in the sense that they didn't try to control that all because I was already in a position where I was already hitting my targets through the core activities I was doing. This was more of a side hobby, a side thing that I could do. And because I was doing everything they were asking me, they kind of just left me to it and weren't going like, well, I can't believe you're posting on LinkedIn while you're not hitting target. Because if I had have been doing that, that might have been a slightly different story if I was way behind. So I think there was a couple of things at play there that stopped that from that limiting mindset of like, oh, we can't track this from coming in on my brand.
That's fair. It's easy to go and die on that hill of activity. But yeah, when your pipeline's full and you're closing deals and you're on target, does it really matter how much activity you're doing or where you're sourcing your deals from?
Mm, yeah. I think if I had been 10% to my annual quota and I was behind, I probably would be in a bit of trouble if I was posting TikToks and whatnot. Clearly during working hours as well. But because I was already succeeding, like no one's going to be like, "Whoa, stop doing that," just because we're control freaks. There are going to be companies like that, yes. Um, Especially if you're going to do things that are slightly more humorous and on the edge of what B2B is typically like. But yeah, I think that helped. So by having already done everything I need to do in my main job, I was able to really have free reign coming onto social media.
Amazing. One of the biggest questions I get, Will, is I love social selling. I've actually started to go and, like they'll say like I'm just starting to get momentum. I'm starting to book meetings now from social. But how do I pitch this to management? How do I get my leadership to see this is a legitimate way to sell?
Yeah. At this point, I'd hope that a lot. Okay, you know what? That's probably a bit optimistic of me to say that. But there are so many people who are now doing this successfully, and you can point to them and say, "Wouldn't you want that person to be on your team?" Like, if you look at the impact that some of these people who have built followings are having, not just in the sales space, but I've seen people who have huge HR followings, sellers who have really tapped into that audience, or huge legal followings as well. People who sell legal software. Why would a company not want that? That's free marketing and with the benefit of pipeline directly for that seller and for the team.
Sometimes I wonder, I'm going to get probably in trouble for this one, but that's okay.
Mm,
Sometimes I wonder if executives consider how they buy and how it's changed.
yeah.
Because it's interesting when I talk to some executives about rolling this out, and I'm like, so let me get this straight. You just told me you'll never buy that way because it pisses you off. Yes. And that it actually lowers your thought of like their reputation in your mind. Yes. But that's what you want me to teach your salespeople, your sales team to do.
Yeah.
Yes. Doesn't that seem a little odd?
Yeah. I think people have really changed the way they buy. These days, a lot of it does come down to mind share. If you're already really familiar with a personal brand, then when it does come time to review that type of solution, you're probably going to call them first because they take up space in your brain. So if I even if it's not as proactive as me reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, I'm building familiarity," so that and I'm also potentially educating them on the problems they might have while I'm doing that. So then when it does come time and they're like, "We do have that problem," cool, Will, or whoever the rep on the team who's doing the best social selling is. Um, you can sometimes name a category and people will just snap. They'll give you a name right there because not only is the brand doing it, but the reps are everywhere as well. Okay, a gong, not gong, sorry, should I say? Dooley. It's a good one. They're everywhere,
Julie's
right?
great.
We've got a ton of people on their team who are putting themselves out there. Some of them moved on, but like Ryan, Zoe, Mark. All of those folks put themselves out there, and as a result, the company appears a lot larger than it actually is.
I actually had Zoe on the show yesterday, and we were talking about like finding your voice and like, so what happens when you post? What happens if you ask? But I think the one thing that people forget too is that like Zoe, most of her posts are just her being
Mm,
real, being a
mm,
real person, putting that out in the world and connecting with people on an emotional level. So when she asks for something, like she's made so many deposits in that bank account that people
yeah.
are like, you know what, you've done so much for me. And honestly, it'd be the same thing if you went and called me up, Will. You're like, hey, would you go and help me out with this? Hell yeah.
Mhm,
Because you're consistent and you don't, it's not, it's almost like, you remember when you first started posting
mhm,
and at the bottom of your post, it was always a call to action to sell something.
mhm.
And then you realize that it kind of like kills the whole vibe when you're like,
Yeah,
I'm trying to go and be like so like generous and do all of this. And then it's like, but you're
yeah,
not.
yeah. There are so many posts that I see from people that would be really good posts if they didn't have a pitch at the bottom of them. Like, you don't need to pitch. People will start paying attention. You don't need to say, give this big piece of advice and then be like, "Oh, by the way, my solution actually helps with this thing." People will become curious if you do those deposits, and it's especially if so maybe you don't pitch in the post, but you can sometimes convert those people who have been following you for a long time. And me and my SDR used to do this a lot. We used to go through people who are frequently engaging, and we weren't going to reach out to them and be like, "Hey, I saw you liked Will's post. Do you want to have a demo?" Because that's tacky and no one's ever going to like my post anymore if they know that's the catch 22. We would reach out to them the same way we would do any other prospect and say, "Hey, notice this thing about you, observation. Thought that might mean you're facing this problem. Our solution helps with that. Is this interesting to you all? Is that relevant? Is this a problem that you're facing?" Simple messaging like that. Now, that's the same messaging that we were sending to everyone, but these people, because they'd been engaging with my post, they were familiar with me, and more so, they were familiar with my company and offering as well. So that way, even if it wasn't me reaching out to them, it was my SDR, they were having a lot of success there as well. And it's just that omni channel being everywhere, and social media is a great way to do that. I used to actually back in the day when I was a young sprout, 21 years old, I went on a ski season and I managed a bar and a hotel in France. And every week we'd get a new set of guests, and I had a target behind the bar. I had to do like 2,000 euros a year, not a year, a week per 90 guests. And I found that people spent more at the bar when they liked the bartender. They would come in, they were like, "Hey, Will, how's it going?" I'm like, "Yeah, 2 beers. I know your order, whatever it is." However, every week I get a new set of guests, so it's really hard to build those relationships every week, new people. So what I actually found was really helpful to do was to actually on the first night I'd do a pub quiz, and I'd get up there and I'd run it like a comedy set. So I'd be cracking jokes, making fun of a few of the patrons a little bit. And what that allowed me to do was build a relationship with all 90 people in the room at once. So the next day they all come to the bar. "Hey, Will, I know Will." And that relationship being built en masse. And the same idea is what social selling is. You're standing up in front of everyone, and you're giving them value, giving them a laugh, whatever it may be. And therefore, when it does come time for them to order a drink, let's say, they already know you, they already like you.
I didn't know that story. I love it. So you found your voice long before social media.
Took an extra 5 years after that before I started posting on social media, but yeah.
Hey, if we all knew, we all could have seen into the future, we all would have. We talked about this before. We would all have been on Twitter or every social media and just
I
owned it.
wish. I wish. It's how you know, life with regrets. I wouldn't have known anything. I wouldn't be able to post the quality content I post today if I hadn't had all the experiences between now and then. But yeah, I wish I'd started so much earlier. That's probably one of my biggest regrets.
So I get this question a lot, and it's how do I post to find my voice and not sound like this robotic sales? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you find that?
It's got to be based on in real life. There's a lot of people and a lot of posts that I see out there that are very similar to the post that I saw yesterday from someone else. It's kind of copy paste ecosphere. What you can do to avoid that and make it true to yourself and let people get to know you a little bit is post only about things that actually happen to you, because otherwise you're going to run out of things to post about. So, from let's say today, after you've watched this session, start taking notes of when interesting stuff happens. When you learn something, when you make a mistake, make a note of that and then let that inspire your content, because then it's you, and that's what people are coming for. They're not coming from the same message that they got from me earlier the day. They want you, and that's how you're going to build that brand and actually convert people, by being authentic. So what I'd be doing is looking out for opportunities in training while talking to customers, and write those down, especially talking to customers. If you don't sell to salespeople, well, let's say you sell to HR folks, you talk to HR people every single day. That means you're hearing their problems. Posting about those and posting about what you learned and those problems that they're facing is going to be more valuable to other people in HR. They're going to start paying attention. So listen to your customers and see what lessons you can learn there, and see what's valuable for the other people who you might be selling to in that market.
I love that because it goes back to what we originally opened with. Like, instead of staying in the one-on-one, you took that aha moment, that mystery that people have, and just put it out in the wild, built in
Mm,
public where it has that magnetic pull.
yeah.
But the one thing I always hear people say though is, that's great, Will. That's great, Nick. It sounds great in theory, but it's slow. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say it's not slow. Like it you gotta it's not a turnkey solution. That's why cold calling email is more tempting, because you can send out a bunch of emails and get a response that day. You can make a cold call and have a conversation in 30 minutes. This is something that I would say do consistently, and it will build over time if you do that consistently. So I would be focusing on consistently putting stuff out there, not looking for results immediately. You've got to have some patience. Uh, but sales is all about having patience. So do it. Don't think it's gonna be an overnight success. There are people who are overnight successes, should I say, especially on platforms like TikTok, where you can post one video and go viral. But don't make that the goal. Don't focus on the output. Don't focus on, like, I want 200,000 followers. Focus on the inputs. Focus on what you can control, which is showing up every day with quality content and doing that every single day. And people will notice. I assure you.
What would you say could be some of the accelerators? So if you, other than like really knowing your customers and repeating those conversations for others to hear
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't like breach privacy, but like, what are those like, how do you hit the accelerator button without going to the automated campaigns and the pitch slaps? Like,
Yeah.
what would be your advice on that?
That is a fantastic question, Nick. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you a story. Before I started posting consistently, which around this time last year, it's not been long. Uh, Before that, in December of last year, so December 2020,
Hmm.
yeah, I believe so. That's right. I'm just trying to do my math right. I made a post about I got sent an email by a prospect saying, "Will, unsubscribe me. You're harassing me. You're excessively calling me." And then I was like, "Wow, that's like I got chewed out by email there." They'd actually sent it to me on an email on LinkedIn, and then an hour later, someone messaged me saying like, "Will, you reached out to me a couple months ago. We're now looking for a solution." So I just grabbed both of those screenshots, I put them next to each other, and I said, "Look, like at this time, I thought I was failing in sales, and then an hour later, I realized everything I was doing right." I posted that. Wasn't the most amazing post. You see those things a lot. However, I'd actually been networking quite a lot with someone who I just mentioned, Sarah. I'd sent her a lead, and she'd just been selling to our company. We'd just bought Gong, so she had, because I'd been chatting with her. LinkedIn fed her my post. She engaged with it, which gave her a ton more exposure. So, and you see it now as well, by commenting and networking with others who maybe have followings or maybe even they don't. By building that community around yourself, you're going to have people who support your posts, and people supporting your posts is going to give you more visibility. So that if there is a way to accelerate things, it's about having like an almost an outbound mindset with social selling. So you can't just put stuff out there. You've got to get involved in other people. You've got to talk to people. You've got to network with people. You've got to offer insights on their posts, uh, comment on people who you maybe aspire to be like, or share your own experience on their posts, or ask questions. Simple things like that. People do it to me. They comment on my posts, and it kind of makes me, gives me a little bit of a I notice them, and then when I see their content, I'm going to engage with them back, because I'm like, oh, they've built some familiarity with me. Now they're saying something interesting. I'm going to share my thoughts on theirs. So that would be one way you could speed things up a little bit, rather than just throwing something out there every day. Uh, get involved with other people conversations as well.
I think that is so much bigger than people realize too. with comments being content, and it's because of trust through association. If people love your content, that you get a laugh, like it's like great comedy because it's you're pointing at a reality, a real truth that salespeople live,
Mm,
and they're like, yeah, like Will gets it, and then they see that you're commenting and talking to me, and I'm showing up all the time. Now you get trust through association, so you've almost cheated the system. And if you use this ethically and you're honest about how you're doing this, like just pick 3 to 5 influencers and
mhm.
just show up every day. It's like going to the gym or like a coffee shop.
Yeah,
Nobody knows you the first day, nobody knows you the first week. It
yeah.
takes a month, sometimes 2, sometimes less, depends on how hard you're trying, really, how hard you're trying and how thoughtful your conversations are, but it works, and it works fast.
It really does. And these days, it's actually made it become a lot easier. You can they've got the bell feature on LinkedIn right now. Whack the bell on for 10 people who you really enjoy the content of, people who you maybe want to aspire to have the similar talk about the same things as you. So other creators in your niche, put the bell on for them and get involved in those conversations. And then soon enough, they'll recognize you. They'll see your content. Other people who follow them will start seeing your stuff as well. These algorithms really do reward you acting like a human being rather than just a megaphone.
Absolutely, that I love that bell feature because now you don't even necessarily need all the fancy tools, like, you can just show up.
You get notified. Boom. I've got my bell on for about 10 people. Uh, more peers than people who I look up to these days, but people who I know whose content is always great. This morning, saw Will Allred posted, for example, about some email things about LinkedIn messaging, and I jumped in there and shared a funny thing. And he got 12 likes, but that's 12 people who follow Will who may not even know I exist yet. So I
Mhm.
didn't do it because of that. I did it because I actually had something to share. But right, uh, those people now know who I am. Maybe they're going now that they've engaged with my comment, they might actually see my content when I post later on this afternoon.
I just noticed that Roman wrote a really good question in the comments here, I'm gonna pull it up.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
the $1,000,000 question. How do you prove to the sales leadership as a marketer that social selling in LinkedIn is worth investing into without alienating them? And maybe, I don't know if it's worth talking about some of the stories, like your current position now and how you guys are maybe tracking or like what that looks like in the whole scheme of things, because you're in a really cool position. And I don't and we haven't really talked about what that looks like, how you're tracked or anything of that
Mm.
nature.
Yeah, yeah, I'm in a funky little job here. Right. So shall we answer that question or shall I tell it? Look,
If you want to
would
go and
you-
tell a story first, you can, or if you want to just go in, like, just dive
yeah,
into this and kind
I
of
want
give
to
like your gut.
I want to dive into Roman's question a little bit because how do you prove to the sales leadership as a market that social selling on LinkedIn is worth investing to without alienating them? I think it's about just pointing to other success stories, even potentially leading by example. If you're a marketer, then you actually have the ability to go and social sell as well. You can rep your brand as a professional. And if you can do that and generate some leads and throw them to the sales team, they're going to be like, "Whoa, I want to do that." The same thing with anything. Like I do the same thing when my old team would be in the Slack channel and someone would be like, "Hey, I sent this video today. It was really successful." And then all of a sudden, everyone wants to send videos. So if you can prove some success with an external or better yet, an internal case study of someone who's done it and got some results from it, then other people are going to be tempted to do it because it's a shiny object that other people, if you can show them a shiny object, they'll go after it. Whereas if you don't have any of that, don't have any case studies, don't have any examples of where this works, you're gonna have a really hard time just telling someone that's a good thing to do. Show them if you can. Um, Maybe even see who they follow because the sales leadership people are probably following some large sales creators. Like, can you imagine if you had a Carl Coleman on your team? Can you imagine if you had a think of someone else,
Sarah,
Gabrielle
Samantha
Blackwell,
McKenna, Morgan
Sam
J. Ingram.
McKenna, yeah, Morgan Ingram on your team. Can you imagine the impact that have us? So maybe check out who they follow and who they engage with, and say, hey, don't you can't say it doesn't work because you're engaging with JB Sales content every single time you follow Morgan, James, or even John himself.
I noticed that Roman just did a follow up and he said, so then I need to tie company's target audience into mine. Mine is so different.
If you want to do it yourself, yeah, but There could be someone who's close to you who you can coach to do that, or a sales rep who's already doing pretty well, maybe who you can kind of mentor into that kind of success. Um,
Maybe somebody in CS
maybe
that
someone
is
in
seeing the
CS.
value.
They're talking to customers every day. CS are like a gold mine for a lot of companies. This is a whole different topic, because CS is like the department that doesn't get talked about enough on LinkedIn. They know a lot about their customers, and they probably know a lot more than the customers know about other customers in their space. So, yeah, maybe someone in CS. That's a great shout. Um, and CS, you probably won't get told off as much, because generally they're not as quite as strictly managed as the sales team in terms of KPIs. So you can probably afford to take some time away from them, maybe. But yeah, I'd be looking for, if you can't get in someone internally, then look for an external case study, a rainmaker in your niche or industry. So if you sell to law, Alex Sue is someone who I follow in the legal space. You could use him as an example and say, hey, look, like, this guy's building this huge brand. Imagine if we had that. What would that mean for us? And then once you have that, by the way, in your company, you really need to enable it. One thing that at my previous company I didn't see until the very end, like the week I was about to give my notice. They were like, "Will, we want to do all these things. We want to give you some budget, and so you can make content. We're going to give you some equipment." I was like, "Oh, this is." I wish they'd done this a month or two ago, because I probably wouldn't have even looked at this new job, right? Because another thing that people get worried about is, if you build a personal brand, if you social sell, you're going to get job offers. If you put yourself out there, people will see you, and people are going to try and recruit you. Um, I don't get hit as much up today because I do something very unique. But when I was a seller doing this, it was crazy. People see it and they want that for their team. Um, so you've got to make sure that if you're going to do this and let someone build a brand like that, you've got to enable them to stick around as well. Make sure they feel recognized for that work once you do see some success as well. Thank you, Roman.
Like, I got a sales rep in my ropes. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
like, if you were going, and even if you were just talking to 10 people and they were sitting in a room, those 10 people had nothing to do with what you're selling. That's a hard conversation to have, especially if you don't know them.
Mm,
But if you know those 10 people, you know those 100 people better than anyone else, that's all it takes. Just takes 10. From 10, you'll get more. But I think that's where too many people try to focus on the 100,000, right? And you're like, you start small, work your way up.
yeah.
Understand, like you were saying, keep your notes. Understand why deals close quickly. Understand where your bigger deals, like the win-loss analysis.
Mm,
Understand the messaging. Talk to different departments in the company to understand where the roadblocks come up or the hiccups, or like what we were saying earlier, go talk to CS and figure out who they hate. I mean, figure out who they don't want to work with or don't
yeah.
prefer to work with, and wrap that all into your content and who you're building in your audience.
Yeah.
And it does work.
Yeah. If you're a seller right now, I'll tell you, one of the easiest pieces of content you could do on your next discovery call, when you're talking to a customer and learning about their problems, say, hey, how long has this been an issue for? It's 2 years. Okay, what have you done to fix it so far? Oh, we tried this, this, and this. Okay, did that work? No, it didn't. Fantastic. So that there is already a story. You could then go out and make a post on LinkedIn saying, if you have this problem, a lot of people tried to do this, it doesn't work because of X, Y, Z. Now that problem could potentially cost you this. That's an interesting post on its own, and it's also messaging that will probably get someone interested in your product. But those types of stories are what's going to resonate with your audience as well. Because if you're talking to that type of person, then you can get that in front of them.
I saw someone a couple weeks ago that they asked their marketing team for custom links, for a custom meeting link and a custom landing page, or some way just to track it. And
Mm.
so they put it in their featured content in their profile. And so
Yep.
every time somebody clicked it, they had proof how often it actually generated a result.
Yeah.
And something that was like almost 30 meetings that they booked in a month without them sending the link. Like, that was just the link in their featured.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got similar stories to that kind of thing. Like, my own TikTok, I just put SalesFeed's website on there, and never pointed anyone to it, because on TikTok I don't want to be like, hey, go follow SalesFeed. But I put the link in my bio, as one of the links in my bio, should I say. I had like a link tree set up. And I went and checked the other day, and it's got like 500 clicks. And those people we didn't even know were coming from there. So if you can find ways to attribute it, that's going to be a better way to justify it. But I wouldn't focus on that, because once again, So they're focusing on the results. If you focus on the input, the results will come. I promise you. If you do the right things on this end, that end will do that. There's not a whole lot you can do to make someone like and comment on a post, other than put good content out there. A lot. So yeah.
Could we go and take that, Will, to what you're doing right now and how you're tracking yourself,
Hmm.
and maybe even some of the expectations from sales feed of what are some of the results they're trying to get to, and like walk us through that?
Yeah. So my role right now is like a professional social seller in a way. Um, I basically rep my brand. My entire job is to build following, make content for salespeople right now. So through sales feed, I put a lot of my content there, but a lot of what I do on my own personal channels is promote that back as well, because that's the value I bring to my employer. I have a following. I can then try and convert those people into following the brand I represent. It's quite a new idea. It's called evangelism. There's a few people doing it now on LinkedIn. And to your point about measuring it, that becomes quite hard to do. Um, but you do find these qualitative measures where people are just like, we get shouted out a lot now. People will say like, "We love sales feeds content. Will and Tyler are crushing it." All these things. So generally, I'm measured on the engagement and following growth of sales feed. Um, rather than anything directly from me. Now, I don't know where all those followers are coming from exactly, but I can look through and I recognize a lot of names in there as well. And when I do a big shout out or I make a post that gets like 1,000 likes and I put follow sales feed, you will often see a spike in the analytics there. So keeping a close eye on the things you can report on is really important. And generally, if you know what you've been doing and what you've been inputting, and you can keep track of that using things like Shield, and even the new LinkedIn analytics were pretty trendy. Some people don't have them yet. Do you have them? Yeah, those are pretty
Morgan
useful.
doesn't. I keep telling him
I
it's
have
a
them. They're cool.
3,000 follower thing.
Yeah, yeah,
He's gonna kill me for saying that again.
yeah. So yeah, generally I get tracked on the following that I grow for the brand that I represent, which is SalesFeed, and we just hit 6,000 followers, and we've been doing this for. But I've been on the team since mid September last year. So what's that? 7.5 months ish. Um,
Sounds
and
about
generally,
right.
yeah, it's been a good success so far on that. And in that time, my own following has grown from 7,000 to nearly 16,000 right now. So that's also a metric we can track, because a lot of the content I post has come from sales feed. So that's all building familiarity while I'm doing that as well, which is an added benefit of having me on the team.
And I know you track more things. Like even with your podcast episode with Morgan, you talked about the research you do with your audience. And I think a lot of people kind of go, they run and gun when they think about creating content. I know
Mm.
you've dialed this in a lot. Could you talk about a little bit about the analytics, what you're looking for? How do you know that something's going to be a good piece of content? How do you know that you should be repurposing it? Like, could you walk us through a little bit of like a deeper look into the analytics in your audience?
Yeah, yeah. So to make sure I'm answering the right question, like, how do I know if a post's going to be good or
Or even what to post about? Like, how
mm,
do
mm,
you like you talked about like keeping a notepad and like
yeah,
those ideas, but how has your process evolved? Because now you're doing it at a scale that most people can't imagine.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I think I know my audience pretty well, so I sell to salespeople. So sometimes when I have an idea, I'll write that down right there, and then I know it's a good idea. Um, but you've also got to be really aware of what's going on outside of your own posting. So TikTok, especially, I do this a lot. I'll do a lot of research. I like to go, and you can do these filters and searches on there where you can sort by most liked that week, and that will give you a good idea of what's trending, what people are talking about that they're getting success. And I like to really deconstruct other people's success and see what I can take from that and how I can emulate that with my own content, not trying to copy. But if someone comes in and I'm like, well, this video has 1 million views. What's the reason for that? Well, I normally look at the first 5 seconds. What was that hook? What got people to stick around? And then what kind of value did they go into after that? And you can apply that to text posts, video posts of other people. So you really should be looking for inspiration outside of your own circle as well, which is why it's really good to go follow people. However, there are times where I do something for the first time and I don't get any inspiration from anyone. And it works. So then I'm going to do that again, right? I'm going to try and find out how I can reuse that because otherwise it gets really exhausting if you're just trying to always do something brand new. So if I had a post from 6 months ago that did really well, how can I repurpose that now? I know that content resonated. It was a written post. Guess what? I can make a punchy video about that topic as well. And that was going to get shown to a whole new audience. Uh, and it's going to be in a whole new format. And the people who did see it 6 months ago are still going to feel like it's new. And even if they did see it and they're like, oh, I know this, the people who saw it 6 months ago probably aren't even going to see this one because that's how funky internet platforms work. So don't be afraid to repurpose the stuff that you know has worked in the past. Look to other creators for inspiration of how they're performing, and that'll give me a good indication. And sometimes, if I can make myself laugh out loud while I'm making a post, I know I'm on something good, right? Because I'm trying to make it for salespeople. A lot of my content is about relatable salespeople, sales things. So I'll generally have a good indicator if I know something's going to do well. And then if I'm going to think about repurposing it, if it's on TikTok or if I want to make a LinkedIn post into a TikTok, which is something I've been doing lately as well, I'll just think of the different, you got to know the audience who's there as well. On TikTok, a lot of young people. It's very informal. You've got to be a little bit edgy. It's very quick. The tips that you give, you don't want to go too into detail. You want to provide value very quickly. LinkedIn, meanwhile, it's kind of similar, but there's a lot of stuff like the trends on TikTok are like only really known to only make sense in the TikTok ecosystem. So I'm going to make a decision if I'm going to share that to LinkedIn or not. Is this going to resonate with that audience there as well? It's a much more mature audience. You don't want to go too edgy on that side of things because people don't want to lose their jobs by just engaging with your content, right? So there's a couple of things there as well. But yeah, experimenting a lot. Sometimes I post and it doesn't work at all. That
I know that
happens.
feeling.
The good thing is, if you make a bad post, it's going to get 100, maybe it gets 10 likes and not that many people see it. It's not the end of the world. No one's judging you. Not that many people saw it.
Yeah.
Keep doing it. Keep experimenting. Find your stride.
Yeah. And like you said, reverse engineer. Why didn't it work? What
Okay.
didn't grab their attention? Like I loved what you said about using TikTok to go and like deconstruct like why did people love this? What was the hook? What was the because I think it was the Science of People. They did a research on TED Talks and they started stripping away the part of the video, the sound, like to figure out when did people make up their mind when it was going to do really well. And it was in the first 10 seconds. And funny
Mm,
enough, it was the speed. They didn't even need sound. It was the speed and the body language of the presenter.
hmm
More nonverbal, hands moving, facial expressions, and it kicked it off. But yeah, looking at all those different things and reverse engineering. And one thing you didn't mention, but you do this so well, is you reply to every comment, and
Oh.
you are so dialed in with your audience.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, but definitely, yeah, that's how you create a community around you. That's how you keep people coming back. If you creating conversation with people, if someone like Roman here comments on our video on this chat,
Mhm.
engaging with him, it's going to mean that Roman might come back. You know, we're not just shouting. We're having a conversation with people. And if you can build a little, they call it like these days community. Everyone used to think, oh, it's a Slack channel. These days you can have like content driven community. You can have a circle of people. I know there are 30 people who consistently engage in my content and they know me well as well. So I respond to, you're right, I do try and respond to every comment I can. There are some that are hard to respond to, like, this is great. All right, thanks.
Cool.
I'll just like that maybe, or cheers, appreciate it. Or like if someone tags their friend, I'll be like, hey, thanks for sharing that with your friends. But like, there's you can't obviously respond to everyone, especially when you get these big posts. But it's a great way to show gratitude and also start a bit of a conversation. And if people start going back and forth in your comment sections and they know that you're going to answer their questions, they're going to keep doing that. And that's going to actually boost a lot of your content as well because it's engagement, and engagement gets you more views.
Roman asked another good question about brands that are killing it on TikTok.
Yeah. Brands or people? I suppose there's two different categories here.
So he says specifically brands, like even like Refine Labs just dropped a really fun video. You guys, Gong I think is doing some more creative stuff now.
Yeah.
I think Dooley's doing some fun stuff.
Uh, yeah. I would say I don't follow. I don't think Dooley's doing it. Let me just think. So if you actually just go to Sales Feed, which is the one I manage on TikTok, That's one big example. I reckon probably the best one as well because I'm biased. And we've also got, I think, the most followers in terms of B2B brands, at least. And then you just go to who I follow on that account. I just exclusively try to follow B2B marketing and sales companies and creators. There are a lot of good examples in there. Um, Video does a pretty good job. And then Sam Sales or Sam McKenna, Scratchpad have really been cranky on the content. They've done a really good job, actually. Um, Panda Doc are doing well. Chili Piper are doing fantastically well. They've really nailed that audience on TikTok. They use it more of as a recruitment platform, but they also do a lot of evangelism and pro women in sales stuff and really showcasing the company culture as well. And then there's a lot of different individual creators as well, who everyone would recognize. A lot of names that I've actually mentioned so far. RepView are doing well on there as well, which is a sales compensation platform. So yeah, I'd recommend just going to either my profile or SalesFeed's profile on TikTok. Click on who I follow, and then you'll just get a huge list of people. I just tried to follow anyone who's doing good stuff in B2B.
I want to go and change the pace here to something a little bit more fun.
Okay.
I want to
Uh,
talk pet peeves on LinkedIn, and we can talk about things that we used to do and like tell stories of like the results that it had, or just I think one thing people don't appreciate is that if you send something, but you don't always see like get the direct feedback, you don't really know what's going on. But when you're that executive that gets it 100 times a day, you
mhm.
see patterns and it bugs you.
Yeah.
What is your what is your biggest pet peeve with social selling or LinkedIn?
I hope I don't upset anyone here who's done this to me, but when I get tagged in a post, so you know what I was talking about earlier. Back when before I was doing all this, I made a post that got like 700 likes because Sarah commented on it. It put that video out to all her audience, and more people saw it basically. Now, some people think that if you get someone with a following, like I'll give myself an example, if I like your post, then more people will see it, which is true. But then they think the reason that happens is because I saw your post, I liked it, I commented on it, I did whatever. They think they can hack that by tagging me in the post when they make it. So they'll tag myself and Sam McKenna and Will Allred and Morgan Ingram, and they'll tag all these influencers in their post thinking that's going to boost their engagement. It won't. It's actually quite irritating because I get that 3 times a day with people who I don't know. If it's someone who I know who genuinely wants my insight, is like, hey, Will, what do you think of this? I'll always 100% like and comment on that. When they tag 30 people, all of which just happen to have over 10,000 followers, that's a lousy thing. Everyone sees it, and that often will mean like, this person's just clout chasing a little bit. Like they're just trying to get me to engage so that more people see their posts. That's a hack. It doesn't work. Even if all those people do comment on your posts, tagging that many people in your post kills it because LinkedIn treats it as spam essentially. So yeah, don't go just tagging random people in your post to try and get them to like on it. Bad strategy. Now, if you follow me and you know that I love Star Wars stuff and you see a Star Wars video and you tag and you make one, you tag me in it, heck yes, I'm gonna like it, comment, engage, and I'm gonna probably like be your best friend forever. But doing the other thing where it's just like literally just trying to get tag 50 people in your post to try and get them to engage, that's a strategy where I'm like, not so much. Um, so yeah,
And it's hard
that's
when
that's
you
probably
can't
one
respond to it
that's a big
either.
pet peeve for me. Yeah.
When somebody just tags you randomly and it's not in your wheelhouse, it's not relevant to what you do, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'd
It's
love to help you and like comment on this, but it's so random,
I
or
don't
it's like politics, or it's negative Nancy. And that's another thing I hate. It's like when people they like tag an SDR and then they ream them out, and you're like,
Oh, that's a big no-no as well. Try and now I dislike toxic positivity. I don't think everything should be toxically positive. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows, as Rocky once said. Um, so yeah, critique, but like don't make that your thing. Like even critiquing is I wouldn't critique anything really. Um, I would be looking. You can say be negative without being mean in a way, if you know what I mean. So I'd be really careful about that because that's a trap I've fallen into as well. Accidentally, and someone just pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Will, that's probably, you know," and they were right. So that was a lesson I learned. So yeah, try and keep it for the most part positive, or always try if you're going to make it negative, make sure there's a learning there. Don't just be like I get a lot on TikTok, like salespeople are bad. Okay, right. But what could we be doing better? If you can say like salespeople do this thing badly, this is what they should be doing instead, then that's a lesson. If you just complain, then you're just whinging, and that's not interesting for anyone. And it's probably not a good way not a good wagon to hitch, not a good horse to hitch a wagon to. So yeah, that's one
You
thing.
post a bad post, it's a topic, right? It's something logical. It's gone. When you hit somebody with emotion,
Mm,
that sticks. And that's where you got to be danger, like where the danger comes from is something that's emotionally charged. But I think that's even why some content does well. Because like some of your stuff about procurement, I'm watching it, I roll my eyes. I was like, yeah, you coming to sign today? Oh yeah. Are you gonna bring procurement in?
mm,
No, no. Oh.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's entertaining. That's relatable, right? We're not going to make that many friends in procurement doing that, however. But Roman asked another question, sensitive topic. What about people bringing up cases of harassment on LinkedIn? It happens a lot, unfortunately. Yeah, don't be a harasser. I have views on things, and for the most part, I'd like to hope that I've got the right perspective and support the right things. But I try to avoid those conversations where I can. Um, really, just that I won't try to avoid those conversations where I can. When I see people doing that and being toxic and showing hate towards a group of people, it really irks me and it makes me so like why why do that if you're not going to be spreading if that's just hate, right? So be really careful of that because that's a good way to get cancelled as well, and that is a thing that does happen. Uh, Often to people who are if I went out and posted something absolutely horrible on LinkedIn this afternoon, my career would be over. Um, Luckily, I don't have that much horrible things to say, but that's another example of where you'd really want to keep that to yourself, even if you do have those negative views.
It's like the water cooler conversation. They're like the career limiting moves. If you wouldn't say it in a conversation, don't say it on social media. If you're saying it to be respectful and start a productive conversation about it, like, this happens all the time where I get hit on in DMs. It creates such an uncomfortable environment, and it's just not the right way of doing it. Like if you're posting like something about like that and it's a productive conversation, I can get it. But
Mhm.
like if you're going on about politics or anything else and really strong opinions,
Yeah,
you're playing a very dangerous game that it's not about your audience, then it's just all about you,
yeah.
which
Even posts that are about those things, if you do find yourself disagreeing with something that someone has said, really think about whether or not you want to be involved in that conversation. If you want to have an argument, or if you're going to get involved in that conversation, how are you going to go about it? Are you going to be like, "You're wrong," or are you going to maybe ask some more questions of the author? I post a lot of sales advice. Sales is a topic that a lot of people have different opinions on. Some people like to use a permission-based opener in their cold calls. Some people like to say, "Hey, how are you?" Some people like to just go straight into a pitch or question it. So if I post my preference, it's going to be one of those three things. The other two people in that group might be like, "That's wrong." Is it, or is it just a different way someone's doing it? So if you don't agree with that, then either maybe keep going, keep moving on, and don't get involved in that conversation, or get involved and share your own experience of where you've had success without attacking other people's opinions. I think that's the big one there.
my biggest pet peeve,
Go on.
biggest one of all, is pitch
Yeah.
slapping.
Ooh.
And the only thing that comes close, and somebody's going to see this, and I hope that they realize I'm saying it to be helpful and not to be hurtful, is when they pitch slap me with, I love being a guest on podcasts.
Mm.
Yes, I think most people do. And then they follow up, what do you think you could interview me on?
Oh.
But that's no different than going up to a decision maker and saying, what keeps you up at night? What is your greatest fear about your business? It's too direct too soon, and you're expecting the person you're having a conversation with to do a lot of work when they don't trust you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, personally, if I was going to take that approach, never really did want to come on your podcast, Nick. You always do a good job of asking me. Thank you. I might reach out and be like, "Hey, Nick, love the podcast. You'd probably know as well because I could support some of your content. I see your posts. I see you sharing these power hours and the podcast episodes. Like, comment. You're going to become familiar with me. And then I could then reach out and be like, "Hey, Nick, been loving the podcast. Just a deposit. That's a bunch of depositing right there. Then I can come up to you again like, hey, Nick, as you know, I'm a big fan of the podcast. I'm really good at talking to these topics. I've spoken on podcasts about it before. Do you think that'll be an interesting potential episode for your podcast? That puts it in your court. You've already built the familiarity there. I think that'd be a really fair way to approach it. I actually did that with a podcast that I've been wanting to go on for a little while recently, and they were like, "We'll really appreciate it. We actually do things this way, but like, yeah, big fan of your content." So like, I'd build that familiarity with them, so I felt comfortable asking. Um, so yeah, don't just be like, "I want to go on your podcast." Like, yeah, it's very much so like pitch slapping. But same as like just connecting with someone, just sending a message like, "Hey, here's our solution, yada, yada, yada. It's all about me." Even when you're connecting people who you do plan to sell to, show some interest or make an observation on them before you start talking about anything to do with yourself, because no one really cares until they know how much you care.
Raj Nation yesterday was saying that he started tracking the scrolls on pitches.
Yeah.
And he's like, if I have to scroll at all, it's too much. It's a text message.
Hmm.
I'm like, no scroll at a time. I was like, what was the longest? I can't remember if he said 7+ or what, like full scrolls down. It's like they throw you like the 17 paragraphs and it's like, I'm amazing. I'm amazing. Let tell you more why I'm so amazing. Book a meeting with me. It's free for me to tell you how I'm even more amazing. Doesn't matter if you automate it, do it at scale. It's a really good way to burn your reputation
Yeah.
and get yourself reported.
Hmm. Yeah.
What other ones? What about this was a good one for you. Do you guys find Vidyard to be successful? Should you leave your email and cell phone number in the video? What do you think,
Stay off
Will?
topic. Yeah, I love sending people videos. I absolutely love it. And it also helps that people like getting videos from me, right? So make your videos good. Yes, you should be sending people videos 100%. I like to do it a little bit later in my sequences when I'm reaching out to people as a first touch. If I can get them to respond without making a video first, that's probably a better strategy, because it does take a little bit longer to make a video than write an email. But generally, if I haven't got a response, I'll send a video as a great way to stand out. To the second part of your question, should you include your number and email? Depends how you're sending the video. I don't think so. Leaving your number and email often won't result in some. It's like kind of leaving a voicemail. Very few people will return them. Make it easy for them to respond to you, though. So if you send it on LinkedIn or if you send it an email, maybe in the video after you've said, "Hey, here's an observation I made about you. Nick, loved your podcast with yesterday that with Zoe. Enjoyed this question about you. Just curious, how are you currently handling distributing your podcast?" Maybe that's it. Let me know if this is of interest to you. Right now, we're finding a lot of companies are finding it easier to just click one. Let's say it's Hootsuite or something like that. Right now, we're finding it easy for them to distribute with one click, so they don't have to upload in several locations. Have you currently got this sorted? That's a great way to do it. And then I'd be like, hey, if you let me know, just respond to this email and let me know. And then that way, they respond. It's really start a conversation rather than get them to call you or email you. You really want to just be trying to cause them to start a conversation with you, depending on where you're sending that video to them.
I love Vidyard for like buyer enablement and like a little bit further down, because then you could summarize a meeting, throw it in a Vidyard, throw it
Yes.
in an email, and like keep tagging that in so every decision maker gets thrown in an email sequence. They can
Mhm.
go back, and I love it because it's like you just continue, you build momentum, and you carry that conversation forward. But sorry Vidyard, but one thing I've noticed now with LinkedIn doing the whole, when you click a link that it doesn't want to show it,
Yeah.
I find that just that first message, if there's something in there that's, whether it's showing your personality, adding a lot of like energy, that the LinkedIn native video works better just for that first message.
Yeah. I to an extent I agree. Yeah. It plays natively in the player as well. The downside is you can't actually track if that gets watched. Generally, if you're doing a good video, I'm more of a proponent for like, rather than just pushing my solution, I'm more of a proponent for using video throughout your sales process is a good idea generally, regardless of what provider you use, regardless of what platform or medium you're using to do it. Sending videos to your prospect is a great way to build familiarity with them. It's a great way to book meetings, and it's a great way to use throughout the sales cycle to save them time. If they want to see part of the demo or your solution, don't force them into a half an hour conversation if it's only going to take 1 minute to show them. sales reps have this huge need to always have, if you have a next step at least, then just send them a video and be like, hey, look forward to chatting. Here's what you asked for. We'll chat about this on Tuesday at 2 p.m. on the next meeting. Rather than trying to get them on the meeting or wait until then, that can really build momentum. And it's just one extra touch point. And because it's video, it's one more place for them to become more familiar with you. I actually sent a video to someone like that once. Got sent to 10 people in the organization. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going internally viral with this person's company. So just like social media, it's a great way to build more familiarity.
I love it when somebody sends me like a 1 minute or 2 minute demo in a vidyard through even just through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Like obviously you know my market so well because you sent me like the perfect video. I'm in. Like I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
Just sign me up. That's all I that's all that's required at this point. You
Yeah.
nailed it. So I think video is still very underused because people aren't realizing where it's a lever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like same with vidyard. One thing when I saw a company, they would look at who had the best performing vidyards,
Hmm.
ones that got opened the most, got viewed, like, and then they would just go and say, "Okay, this worked. Everybody do it," and send it out in this part of the sequence. And it raised all of their. I think it was from first meeting to second meeting. It raised that second meeting sticking by like 80%.
That's awesome.
But little things, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
If you had to go and give your like best social selling advice for a lot of people here are just getting started. They're just starting to build their networks. If you had to just kind of give your best parting social selling advice, what do you think that would be, Will?
One, start, but two, like I mentioned, don't get too attached to those results. Don't hate yourself because your post doesn't do well. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that you're doing one more thing to get better at it. Uh, yeah. So focus on what you put in and try not to get too tunnel visioned on what comes out of it. It's a long game. It's not gonna you're not gonna flip a switch. One day you're posting on LinkedIn, next thing you know, you're a huge influencer with all the people knocking on your door for a demo. You got to stick to it. Be consistent. There's some ways you can do that. You can find a partner to do it with. You know, someone who you can tag in with who's doing it as well, and that way you can kind of share ideas and back and forth. But yeah, don't focus too much on the results, at least to start with. At my position, it's a good idea for me to measure those things, but don't become too attached to those outcomes of the likes, the comments, and shares. They will come. Just focus on being consistent, sharing things, being authentic. It's so exhausting to pretend to be someone you're not. So yeah, show up as yourself and keep doing it.
Love it. I think my biggest advice, yeah, fail fast and be okay failing because literally nobody's going to see it. It just falls to the wayside and you learn and you get better.
Yeah.
And comment. If I can
Comment.
recommend anything, if you're worried about posting, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm still scared shitless sometimes when it comes to posting because I'm like, oh, is this authentic? Is this what I want to talk about? Is this tie back to a good enough story that I could go and like keep this conversation going? And then I remember a comment. Hey, I saw these themes when I was commenting that people would dive into a really good conversation. Okay, well, let's throw that into a post. I bet you that's going to start a really good conversation, seeing those themes. And then you'll build really good relationships too. You know, your company doesn't own you. You don't have to worry about making it all about your company. Jump in the comments, make it fun.
Yeah.
Now, for those that don't know Will, where do you want people to go and connect with you, follow you?
If they want to follow me, then LinkedIn's a good spot to start. And I'm also on TikTok as well. Like I mentioned, not only should you follow me on TikTok, but if you go to my profile and click who I'm following, you'll find a treasure trove of people who are posting about B2B sales marketing there as well. Um, I try and keep that pretty clean. Uh, Outside of a few close friends, it's mostly just B2B sales and marketing because I know it's the best way to store like good accounts is basically just follow them. Um, You'll also find Nick and Morgan in there as well. So check them out too.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you going on this journey with us, learning about social selling. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to both of us. shoot us a DM, jump in our comments. It means a lot, and we cannot wait to see you again next week. Thank you very much, Will. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.